Hi, this is a continuation of my solo campaign session report of From the Ashes. If you haven't seen the first session of From the Ashes, I recommend that you check out the link in the description below. You will find a playlist containing all of the other session reports. I am going to be running this with Abraham's method, of course. If you do not know what Abraham's method is, it's basically a method to emulate player characters. It will allow you to play any role-playing game, adventure, module, campaign, with you playing as the game master, and with Abraham's method simulating or emulating rather player characters. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the video where I talk about this method that I developed. Now, you may remember from last time that Corvus eliminated that gelatinous cube but ended up quite wounded. So he decides to equip his bow with his +3 arrows at the ready, because he's not going to take any chances. He's quite wounded from the confrontation with the gelatinous cube. So he will have to journey back to town, and it's going to be very dangerous because it is now nighttime. There is a higher chance of having a random encounter. So the journey through the cave and the mountain road was uneventful, but now Corvus must cross the swamp to reach the village. I made a roll to see how Corvus would proceed through the swamp, and I got confused impending structure. My interpretation of this is that in order to confuse predators and other assailants, Corvus would try to stick close to trees and ruins, so that impending confrontations would start with the advantage of cover and high ground. It would give Corvus an edge. So Corvus was quite lucky actually. He moved through the swamp and did not encounter a single enemy on his way back to town. Once he got to town, Corvus rested completely. However, he didn't have enough souls to level up yet. So he decided to purchase a few things. He got padded clothes, plate armor, a two-handed sword. He decided to sell his spear, and he purchased a large shield just in case. Early in the morning, Corvus proceeded to cross the swamp again. This time I made another roll, and I got Discourage Simple Companion. In a simple but bold way, Corvus decided to move with axe and shield, giving the impression that he is part of a larger force. So he moved about in such a reckless way to discourage attackers from getting in his way. The journey across the swamp seemed to be uneventful. However, he did encounter something. This path brought him face to face with a lich. So he saw this mummified being moving about the swamp, dressed in fine clothes, apparently with not a care in the world, and he saw Corvus. Now in this moment I made a check to see if Corvus would detect that the lich was much stronger than him. He has the survival skill, so that gave him a bit of an advantage when it comes to these situations. He made the check, he was successful, and he identified the lich as a very strong, very powerful foe beyond his current combat capabilities. Then I made a roll to see what Corvus would attempt with this lich. I got Clarity, Inconvenient Tourist. I interpreted this as if Corvus decided to pretend that he was just newly arrived to this undead land, this land of limbo or of shadow, of a perpetual state of undeath. And he informed the lich about this. He said that he was new to the land and he was actually looking for a job. So that's how Corvus decided to express clarity of his intentions and to take care of anything that was inconvenient to the lich. Corvus expressed his desire to help the lich against anything that this creature would consider inconvenient, for payment of course. However, the lich was not impressed by Corvus. In fact, the lich presented itself as a ruler of these lands and demanded tribute from Corvus. He asked for 300 souls. This was more than half of what Corvus currently had, so I made a roll to see what would be the response of Corvus. I got Gather, Minor, Mother. So Corvus remembers from his past life that his mother would always tell him to turn major problems into minor grievances. So he decided to relinquish 300 souls to give the League what it asked, and he could always gather more souls later. The League was quite terrifying. Corvus failed his roll to see if he would accumulate stress, and he got 1 point of stress. It was quite an unnerving experience. The League could have easily killed Corvus by his estimation. So the rest of his trek through the swamp was uneventful, and he continued his path along the mountainside, along the road, with no trouble at all. Once again he entered the cavern, and this time I made a roll to see if Corvus would go up the newly discovered steps in the area where he fought against the gelatinous cube, or if he would decide to explore the current cavern grounds. So I made a roll, and I got Disturbed Religious Child. This made no sense with the situation, so I made a probability check with the last card that I drew to see if Corvus would go up the steps. And I thought that the odds of Corvus staying in the current cavern grounds to further explore that area would make more sense. It would be more logical. There would be a higher probability, and he decided to stay and explore the grounds. Although he's still quite shaken because of his encounter with the League. Because of that point of stress, he's constantly looking over his shoulder, very nervous. So he decided to head northwest, the place that he hasn't explored yet. And he found an area divided by a huge chasm, or an abyss rather, because he cannot see the bottom of this abyss that forbids him from getting to the other side. However, there is a shoddy looking rope bridge that could potentially help him get to the other side. That is, if the bridge is safe. So I made a roll to see how Corvus would proceed, and I got Detect Amusing Reputation. Corvus wanted to detect if the bridge was safe, so he tied his waist with a rope and attached this rope to the closest bridge post. And then he started to jump up and down the bridge. It would be quite amusing for his adversaries to see him fall into the abyss. It would damage his reputation as a new warrior in these undead lands. So he proceeded carefully across the bridge. However, halfway through it, a ghost materialized in front of him. It looked like an elderly knight, and the ghost warned him that there was death on the other side of the bridge. I made a roll to see how Corvus would respond to this. I obtained Delay Benevolent Scum. So I interpret it as if Corvus thanks the spirit for the benevolent warning, but he will not be delayed. He will take care of any scum that attacks him on the other side. Then I made a roll to see how Corvus would proceed once he got to the other side of the bridge. The ghost vanished as soon as Corvus stated his mind, his desire to go to the other side, and I got Exhaust Minor Father. So Corvus ignores the warning, and he proceeds to carry out an exhaustive search on a pile of accumulated rocks on the other side of the bridge. Past life memories of his father reminded him of important advice, that he should pay close attention to the small details. He found a sort of grave containing a skeleton and a sword. Maybe it was the skeleton of the ghost that warned him about the danger. And so I made a roll to see if Corvus would pick up the sword or just leave it there alongside the skeleton in case it is a cursed sword, and I obtained Control Graceful Game. The graceful aspect of the blade indicates it is a weapon offering exquisite control, and that will surely give him an edge in any confrontation. So Corvus decides to pick up the blade. Then I made a roll to see what Corvus would do before going further into this cavern, and I obtained Silence Hopeless Technology. My interpretation of this is that Corvus figured out that after talking out loud with the spirit, it would be useless to move stealthily about. So he uses his best weapon, or technology, that is the fancy looking sword that he found, and his shield. He strides into a cave that is partially caved in, and leaning against the far wall, there is an ornate coffin. And from that coffin, a corpse dressed in elegant but tattered clothes jumps out, and it starts to run towards Corvus. It's obvious that the corpse is going to try and attack Corvus. I made a roll, and I obtained Guide Intact Resources. Corvus attempts to guide the battle near a cavern wall with a protrusion to use it as cover. So he's guiding the battle, trying to remain intact with the cover, and to spend as few resources as possible in this fight, be it hit points or some other thing, like for example his magical arrows. He wants to remain unharmed because he doesn't know what else lies in this cavern. He managed to accomplish this because he won initiative. He got behind this cavern wall to use as cover, and the ghoulish fiend launched itself at Corvus. Corvus missed his attack, but at the same time, this ghoulish creature could not strike at him because of his shield and the cover he took. However, the cover would not work now that they are completely in close quarters combat, and I made a roll to see what Corvus was going to do next. I obtained Raise Precise Locals. So Corvus wants to raise his odds of scoring a hit. He's going to forfeit his action this turn, this combat round, in order to identify a weakness, some sort of weak spot in the enemy's savage assault. And he fends off another attack from the ghoul with his shield. He's going to try to locate some weakness. So Corvus strikes, almost cutting the corpse's arm off completely. The undead counters, but Corvus's shield protects him. And Corvus immediately strikes downward, splitting the undead fiend in half. After that, Corvus decides to examine the room, and only the coffin yielded results, producing a necklace and a short sword with strange symbols. I made a roll to see if Corvus would take these new items, and he obtained Learned Bygone Wilderness. He decided to take both because he wishes to learn about the relics and the bygone times of these strange lands of undeath, of Twilight. So he picks up the sword, the necklace, and then I made a roll to see what he was going to do next, how he was going to proceed up the steps once he gets to the zone where he fought the gelatinous cube. I obtained Attempt Slovenly Monument. So Corvus will proceed up the steps in the northern area, attempting a down and dirty approach with his sword, that is the sword that served him so well against the ghoul. And Corvus's bold attitude is so impressive that he will truly become a living monument of bravery. And that's the end of this session. As you can see, we had two examples of how to handle social situations using Abraham's method: the negotiation with the League and the interaction with the Ghost. Very different encounters. The first one could have potentially ended up in disaster. However, it did cost Corvus all of those souls. And the other one, it was more of a benevolent or friendly type of encounter. So it works pretty similar to other types of situations. You just make your roll. You obtain those three words of verb, adjective, and noun, and you make your interpretation depending on the situation, the personality or background of your player character, and the non-player character or situation that he is encountering. Well, thanks for watching this session report, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending DriveThruRPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you. I will continue these session reports, and I hope you will obtain better examples through them on how to use Abraham's method. Once again, thank you, and see you later.